I want to talk about the importance of establishing frames when it comes to fight. Now, this obviously is something that we reiterate a lot when it comes to grappling in general, but for self-defense specifically, come here, Jojo. When we are talking about just kind of like fights in general, right? The importance of establishing frames when you are in close quarter situations where somebody's just squeezing on you or they're just, again, kind of just smashing you. Frames allow us to essentially escape these positions. I'm gonna give you two examples, just two different areas. And again, just open your minds and understand that this framework applies for just about any position that you're getting smashing, right? Let's say he's got a bear grab under the arms. He's just completely compressing me in, maybe body locking me from here, right? There's not much that I can do. If he's really sucking my hips in, it's gonna be very difficult for me to be able to get my hips back. You can kind of see that, go ahead, keep it tight. As I try and work my hips back, it's actually just kind of putting me in a worse position, right? This is where framework comes into play. The moment somebody gets grips like this, first off, you already failed a while ago, right? But if I need to recompose, I have to start establishing frames. What framework allows me to do ultimately is start to create pockets that allow me to either get into a better postured position, allow me to work different grips or different positioning. Maybe I can work off towards their backs, but ultimately it frees me up from the pressure that he's applying, which then allows me to work towards the escape. So if we're, again, talking this example, right? He's sucking me in, first things first, I have to start kind of putting pressure on the head. Now, understand that if this is my ideal frame, or if this is my ideal frame, I'm not gonna be able to go from here to this right out of the gate. You're gonna have to kind of start chipping away slowly but surely at this framework. So the more that he sucks me in, at the whole time I'm gonna try and keep my hips back as much as I can, but I have to get these frames in place right away. If I'm only able to kind of get like my arm in here, then I'm gonna start kind of wiggling this arm down and maybe I can get a little bit of pressure like this. But now look at the space that's already happened. And as I pressure into this, he's not gonna like it. He's gonna try and fight that pressure back with his head. And as he drives his head in, now I'm kind of locking this arm in place. I don't want him to be able to collapse those frames at any point. So I have to keep that pressure in. Same time that that happens, I'm gonna start working my hips back. So now as he tries sucking my hips back in, it's gonna be a little bit more difficult because I've started to establish frames. Now, as we start making more and more space, I can now switch from like a forearm to a palm. And now as I continue to work my hips back, that palm slowly is now going to become a fully locked arm, and now he's got to fight the full body position. But that's if I even want to get that far. If I'm trying to just simply get away, then yes, this is a good option to get. I can now start working away, get up, get out of there, whatever I need to do. If I'm trying to, say, close the distance or reposition myself, then maybe I just need to get enough frame space to where, okay, I started to get these pockets. That allows me to swim under, come back in, and now I don't need those frames anymore. And now I can start kind of body locking and doing whatever it is that I need to do, which now in turn means that Joe here needs to reestablish his frames in order to get out of that position as well. So essentially it goes back and forth, which is why you see a lot of it in wrestling, jiu-jitsu, judo, anything that, again, we're working on closing that distance in clinch fighting and grappling. Frames is what allows us the opportunity to do whatever we need to do. So that's one example from standing. If we do the exact same thing on the ground, right? Let's say like side control. For whatever reason, Joe lands here. He's got full pressure here. His knees are nice and tight. Again, sport, street, doesn't matter. They're squeezing you. This is a really shitty position to be in. If he's keeping everything tight and I'm just trying to like get out of this position and do whatever I need to do, there's not much that I can get from here. But my focus should be, instead of trying to waste all my energy right here, which is where you see a lot of like newer practitioners to jiu-jitsu specifically, they just kind of spaz. I need to start establishing those frames. Now in this specific instance, right, if we're just talking this position, there's three that I want to look for. I want to get control in the hip, I want to get control in the head, and I want to get control in the far hip. So I want those 3 points of contact. Doesn't matter which order you get them in, but one frame is going to allow you to get 2 frames, which gets you to 3, and then ultimately we can get out of this position, or at least, again, recompose. So the first one that I typically go for is this hip one, right? If I'm able to just drive this arm in, and again, put a little bit of pressure, I'm not expecting this to be able to just launch Joe's hip back. But again, if I can just get a little bit of pressure here, that again makes it difficult for him to be able to now bring those hips closer to me. And the more that I work away, I'm able to start kind of making that space. That's what I want. But I have to find that happy medium. If I go too far down, he's gonna be able to just collapse that frame altogether and it's useless. So again, framing does have its weaknesses. If I go too high or too low, it's not gonna be effective. So find that sweet spot, apply that pressure. That's one frame established. Number 2, I want to get under his head. Now, if he's being lazy with his head pressure here, I can swim this arm underneath. And again, it's not going to be one where I get here and then right away I'm able to like drive Joe up all the way. It's going to be, okay, I established this. A lot of times, especially in this position, I'll hook the shoulder, or if we're doing like gi or something or self-defense, I'll grab their shirt material as well. And I'll just start kind of driving my forearm straight up into her throat. Now, the more that Joe moves his head to try and fight that, that's going to allow me to continue kind of working this hand up more and more. And again, I'm going to start working this forearm until I can kind of get like a good full position from here. But again, you have to work towards it. Now, if he is being really good and he's protecting that head, he's not allowing me to get the hand in, then I'm going to bring my arm out, get my hand on his face, and I'm now going to start kind of shifting my body. So again, if I've already established this frame, he's keeping his head tight, I can get my hand up here, I can walk my hips out, And before Joe recomposes and readjusts to that movement, I'm going to use that angle to better position that frame. And now when he closes his hips back in, I've now got 2 frames established. Now again, this is not at any point allow me to necessarily bench press him off of me unless you're strong as shit. But what this allows me to do is start making space, and it weakens his ability to control me. Already, if I let go from here and Joe squeezes and puts all that pressure in, this sucks. If I can get these frames in here, now Joe goes ahead and squeezes and puts that pressure in, it's a lot less. And you can actually see that the more he tries to squeeze me, his body's actually elevating because my frames are kind of acting as like that counter resistance, right? Now the last one in this specific situation is that knee. I want to get that knee or that shin right across his hip. But again, if I can't fit it in there, I have 2 ways to get this shin in place. I can either work my knee up at an angle and come down and get that frame in, and then right away from here, I'm driving and making that space, or I'm gonna walk my hips out, and again, before Joe recomposes, I'm gonna shrink back into him, get the knee into place, and then again, I'm working to create those frames. And what this framework has allowed me to do is relieve the pressure, relieve his smashing power, and I'm now able to start kind of working what I need to do. Now again, we talked about the 2 options. I can use frames to get me out of the situations altogether. So at this point, if I want to just get back to my feet, as Joe continues to drive back into me, I can drive his head, and I can now work more stiff arms and work back up. Or we use this as an opportunity to now recompose and get closer and close the distance. So in this specific instance, I might frame just enough to create this pocket where now I can take this front arm and scoop it underneath and get a deep underhook of my own. And now as Joe starts fighting this, I can now work around, maybe I reverse the position and I end up on top. So understand that framework as a whole is meant to either get you completely out of the situations altogether or create openings that will allow you to position yourself better, or even open up the door for submissions. One more example of this would be, come back to side control, right? One more example of this would be if he's keeping this arm really tight, right? Maybe I can work these frameworks to where now it gives me the option to start scooping. Maybe I can get into position here, and now I can start attacking his arm because I use those frames that allow me to create the space to get my legs involved, to get my body more involved, and that opens up the door for submissions. Or if we're talking self-defense scenarios, it might give me the opportunity to draw a weapon or whatever I need to do. But understand, framing is a very critical detail when it comes to any form of grappling, sport or street. Practice it, understand it, learn how to utilize frames. Also learn how to deal with frames from the other end. On the flip side, if I'm trying to control somebody and he's trying to frame off my face, for instance, right? I don't want to just push back into him. Go ahead, push up. Because now we're just going to kind of get into this position. And again, the more that I push in, the more that I'm starting to create other pockets. So you also have to understand how to deal with frames, especially if I'm trying to control somebody that doesn't want to be controlled. So like for instance, in this example, as he starts really driving this arm up, maybe I kind of let it until it's extended a little bit more. And now I can clear that arm and come all the way down. And now not only have I better positioned myself, I've also eliminated his ability to utilize a frame, and I've opened up the door for me to start applying chunks. So you can use frames to your advantage, you can use frames to get out of positions, you can use frames to set up attacks, whatever you need to do. But definitely something that you need to add to your training if you're not already. Go train, stay safe.